And today I'm going to talk to you about the information management and the information needs for a basis or a central pillar for a circular economy or a circular establishing circular cities. We already heard it from one of the previous speakers, Gerard. He said it nicely. So tracking material flows is about tracking value. So basically, to manage the flows, we need to know the whereabouts and the conditions of materials and or components in space and time. So I'm going to present to you one of the models I've developed, and for the ease of presentations, I'm just going to show you one of the case studies which was used to validate the model. As far as the case study is concerned, we looked at one of the slices of Munich. Here's a district in the western part of Munich. And you can see here's around 2,500 buildings with currently 22,000 inhabitants. And until 2030, an additional living space for another 25,000 people is to be built. So you need infrastructure, you need housing and so forth. So you can already see some of the roads that's being constructed here. So the idea was actually to see what kind of or what materials I can use from my stock to construct my new city. When we go on, we talked about 3D models. The term fell before. So 3D city models were used and combined with material information based on building typologies and the year of building construction to get an idea of what's actually in the building stock. So this is one of the prerequisites actually to do further calculations and see where future materials are gonna be going. Central part, the building stock. So what do we have available? So there's quite a lot of things that we still can reuse or use. For example, and here are some of the results that are shown. So on the top right-hand corner, actually, this is a profile from the 1880s until 2013. So this actually shows how the material accumulated within the given district. So you can see a sharp exponential rise around mid-60s. So this was due to political reasons. For example, we needed a lot of housing, multi-residential housing, to house the lots or the masses of people coming to the city. And when we take a cross-section, we can see that about half of the materials that are accumulated in the stock is made of concrete or is concrete, followed by building blocks. So for example, bricks. But what's actually more exciting is actually the 5% of the total mass, which is actually made out of metals. So this not only has a high economic value, but also like a strategical value, for example, when it comes to getting independent of imports, for example. So once we know this, the composition of the stock and how the stock is comprised of, we can get an idea of what we actually need to target. So half of the mass is actually contained in multi-residential buildings constructed between 58 and 78. So these are actually the types of buildings which we're gonna, or let's say they're gonna retire or they get decommissioned in the next couple of decades. So there's actually a huge potential actually for mining these materials, but there's also the challenge that we actually have to get rid of, for example, pollutants or hazardous substances which are still contained in the stock. So it's about getting the infrastructure ready to actually deal with these flows. When it comes to demolition, so these are actually the supply side, so the materials that become available. So this actually shows what the material I can actually do something with it. So there's a sharp exponential rise at the end of the 2030s, for example, and this also includes all the system losses which occur during for example, the processing or the recycling stages, the collecting stages, and so forth. So you can't actually use 100% of the materials which come out of the stock because you always have losses. I don't know why I'm always pointing at the screen because the computer is here. So, on the demand side as well, so it was differentiated between replacement buildings. For example, have a building which gets torn down, and at the same place I have a similar sized building being constructed. And on the other side, the greenfield development. So you remember the materials that are needed for housing 25,000 people. So actually don't get confused, they actually use different scales, so there's much more material needed in this case for providing the living space for constructing these buildings. I'm doing it again, so but I don't know why. Construction waste is also an issue, but construction waste is more of a through flow through the system, because it's not actually accumulating in the stock, because it goes in on one side and after a short time period it actually goes back out. But you still need to account for it because it's on the input side, so it actually raises your demand, and as well on the supply side. So just to keep it in. And when doing the math, for example, the demand side, you can calculate based on the new buildings, the replacement buildings, and the refurbishment, which I'm not going to go into detail, plus the waste. So you can see on the left side of the graph, there's the huge demand, the material demand that is needed for construction in the case study area. And afterwards, there's a sharp drop because we just need material for the replacement buildings or refurbishment, so which has a much lower magnitude than constructing a new city. Just two examples when plotting supply and demand. So here the dotted line and the black solid line. So you can get an idea of when supply exceeds demand, for example. So here when the line crosses, and it can be seen that around at this point here for steel, I just chose two examples, and recycled aggregate for production of recycled concrete. So at the end of the construction period for the new city, we actually have more material available. So the supply exactly exceeds the demand. So we need to put strategies in place, to find a place, what to do with these materials, or also to plan logistic systems, for example, recycling systems. What are going to be, what capacities do we need? What are the landfill capacities, for example? So these are just some of the issues you can do with this data. Just in conclusion and to round up, as one of the central aspects, it is important, the circular economy or circular cities and circular buildings and so forth, they're not going to be established if we don't manage the data and if we don't track the material flows. So this is maybe an urge for architects and all the people in the building industry. For new buildings, for example, it's not that hard to write down what's in the building, but it's not being done. I know what I pay for, so it's something we need to do if we want to have circular cities. So there are tools in place. For example, the BAM project, there's also the Madaster project and so forth, which actually provide these tools. So this is an urge maybe to use them. There's some information available also on the BRE stand. So this is my take-home message in a nutshell. Thank you, and while I'm still here, I was told I have to advertise the new book, which was presented as part of the BAM project, was one of the outputs. So if you want to know more about the material information and how the materials need to be managed, what kind of data is needed, then you might want to download it. And it's for free, so that's okay. Thank you.